Thanks for sticking around through the water company meeting. So this regular meeting of the Carefree Town Council will come to order. Silent roll call and a pledge of allegiance. Ms. Melissa Price, please lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, just as a reminder, we live stream these meetings, so when you come up to the podium, please speak into the microphone and loud and clear, and the same to the council. Okay, first item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Item number 1, approval of the May 2nd, 2023 Town Council meeting minutes, approved as amended. Item number 2, approval of the May 18th, 2023 Town Council Budget Workshop minutes. Item number 3, approval of the May 23rd, 2023 Town Council Special Meeting minutes. Item number 4, approval of the May 25th, 2023 Town Council Budget Workshop minutes. Item number 5, acceptance into the public record of the acceptance to the public record of the March 2023 paid bills. Item number 6, acceptance to the public record of the May 2023 paid bills. Item number 7, acceptance of the cash receipts and disbursements report for April 2023. Are there any items that the council would like to have pulled? So hearing none, I would entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda items 1 through 7.
Motion to approve consent agenda items 1 through 7.
Okay, second?
Second.
Any other comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passed unanimously, thank you. Item number 8, call to the public. The public may address the council on matters not on the agenda. At the conclusion of an open call to the public, individual members of the public body may respond to criticism made by those who have addressed the public body, may ask staff to review a matter, direct staff to study the matter, reschedule the matter for further consideration and decision at a later date, or may ask that a matter be put on a future agenda. However, the council may not discuss or take legal action at this time, so please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. Come up to the podium and state your name and address. And to do so, you fill out one of these forms. I have 2 in hand. First up is Mr. John Mattis.
Hello, John Mattis, Graythorn Circle, Carefree. There have been 2 DUI accidents in the last few weeks, one of them being a fatality on Cave Creek Road by the airport. The idea that you can give a no interest loan to the water department and thinking about 1.2 or 3 million for signage in an area that you're going to be redoing, which I agree, it definitely needs a revamp, but how about talking about the signage after the revamp so you know what you're signing? I'd like to see personally the idea that do you want to have anything in the budget for DUI enforcement. During Bike Week you have a Maricopa County, and the finest is back here, I'm sure they can tell me. Also, is there anything done with that DUI enforcement mobile home other than parked there? I don't believe so. I've been out at night during that time. I don't see anybody. I'd like to see some overtime besides sitting in the back of the council chamber for DUI enforcement and traffic enforcement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Carrie Johnson, you may, just as a suggestion, I think you're going to talk to item number 12. So if you like, what we can do is you can wait until we come to that item. We'll discuss it as a council, and then you'll have an opportunity to speak before we take action. I think it's item number 12. Anyway, when it's appropriate. So thank you. So that'll close call to the public. So thank you for all speaking. Okay, go to the regular agenda item. Item number 9 is current events. So we have a vacancy on the town council, and so we're taking applications. So we will accept applications until the close of business on June 16th. And at the July 11th council meeting, a new council member will be appointed. So if you have an interest in serving, I encourage you to submit a letter of intent and a resume to the town clerk by the close of business of June 16th. If you have questions, that you're thinking about it and you're not sure, you're welcome to talk to any of us. Talk to Candace, Mr. Neese. We'd be glad to speak with you. And then we have a number of items coming up for planning and zoning and general public, or general plan. So, Stacy, maybe you could just fill us in on what the schedule is.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor, members of council, members of the public. Yes, we have 3 upcoming general plan efforts. They will all be led by our consultant, Michael Baker, Matt Klysico. On June 12th, we're going to have an update to the Planning and Zoning Commission to review the status of the overall project and summarize recent efforts, participate in a group exercise and discussion of the existing goals, and then that information will then be brought forward as we kind of continue to move through the process. Staff has already gone through this exercise and provided that feedback to the consultant. He'll be sharing that as well as then receiving more feedback as the Planning and Zoning Commission has also participated as well. June 19th is the third community workshop. It's going to follow up on the same topics that we discussed at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And again, this is really getting into the heart of the document now, which is really important. And lastly, we have a July new community meeting, a community workshop. It'll be our 4th one. And it'll be just a discussion on the state land and open space. And there actually will be a representative from the state land department and their planning department to be a part of that and participate. And, you know, we've heard this is a significant issue in town. There's initiatives to acquire that property, and we're going to have an opportunity to talk about it and see how we can work that into the general plan as we see fit. So I just wanted to, I know those are happening during the summer months. We are on a time schedule to get the document squared away, moving and squared away. All of our workshops are also virtual, so there's opportunity. If you can attend, you can watch the presentation and participate in the same exercises that will be presented at all of these meetings. So thank you.
Yeah, so that July meeting is a great opportunity to actually speak to someone from the State Trust Land Department and get a good understanding and ask questions and figure out what's going on. What's your date?
July 17th, 5 o'clock here at Council Chambers. That information will be posted.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, item number 10, review, discussion, and possible action to approve resolution 2023-05, adopting the tentative budget and bottom line for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023 and ending June 30th, 2024. Mr. Neese.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. The budget process, as we discussed in our workshop, evolves over a 6-month period starting in January. At that point in time, that's the first phase of this, and at that point in time, we're collecting data from outside entities, looking at inflationary indexes and impacts on how we operate, looking at trends as far as staff workloads, and then collectively discussing that and helping to mold the budget. Once we have all that information, then we start the budget workshops. Those were started in May of this year, and we conducted 2 workshops. You heard from town staff and their roles and responsibilities, their workloads and respective trends and items for consideration for the next fiscal year budget. At the second workshop, we shared with you our forecasted revenues and expenses. And today begins the approval process for the budget, the third phase, in which we adopt the tentative budget. In adopting the tentative budget, what we're doing is adopting the bottom line, so the bottom line expenditures. So that's the authorization and the resolution tonight. And that would lead to the population of the Auditor General Forms A through G. That's the official statutory budget of the community, which is advertised like every other community does, and then we have our budget hearing in July. So that's a little bit about the timeline. So we're entering phase 2 with the anticipation of the new fiscal year beginning in July. I shared with the council and the community at our last workshop this overview of the budget. Once again, this is the dashboard I prepare every year. On the left side of the slide is the forecasted revenues of approximately $7.6 million. On the right side of the slide is the overall anticipated operational expenses of less than $7 million. The forecasted surplus is attributed to the construction sales tax, as well as the state shared revenue in the income tax and the recalibration of the income tax with the flat tax this year. So we're expecting about a $600,000 surplus associated with that. We went through the capital projects last time we met as well too. Our infrastructure is not getting any younger like every one of us, so we have to invest in that. Just like best maintenance practices, we have to maintain our infrastructure and reinvest in our infrastructure, and we're looking at about $7.4 million in investment in our infrastructure. The bottom line expenditure, what we're here to do tonight is adopt that $14.8 million figure. There are other proceeds included in that, which is our highway user revenue funds, grants that we'll be receiving that we've already been awarded, and revenue will be coming in associated with that. We also have something called a utility cap fund that Southwest Gas pays us, and we've been accumulating that, and that will go towards the street project. So combined with the operation expenses, the capital expenses, and then the special revenues expenses, the combined budget will be $14.8 million. The action, once again, in front of the council tonight is the adoption of Resolution 2023-05, establishing the bottom line at $14.8 million. The budget hearing will be advertised for July 11th, and Jim will populate those Auditor General forms, Schedule A through G, for this next meeting. That being said, fewer words this time than the last 2 times, but I'll be glad to address any questions that the council might have.
Any question from council? I do have one comment. So we received a request to make a clarification in the budget. And that has to do with on page 94 where we talk about water infrastructure. These are capital projects, and it's listed as $2 million. And the suggestion is, and I agree with it, is to break that out to show Peaceful Place, which is a pumping station, $800,000, and the Silver Saddle project, which is $1.2 million. The total is still $2 million. But just as a point of clarification.
Absolutely, yes, we can absolutely do that.
Great, thank you.
Can I actually just want to clarify one issue, is that I don't know if we've really talked about this at other budget meetings, but we're required by state law to present a balanced budget every year. And that means that our revenues cannot, our expenses cannot exceed our revenues, because essentially from an operational perspective, that would be considered deficit financing, which we aren't allowed to do. That's against state law. So when we look at our capital budget, the portion that for the capital improvement program is, spent with revenues coming in from different areas, but our rainy day fund is used for temporary purposes during economic downturns or when revenues are not meeting expectations, and we can use that for filling in when revenues run short. But I just want to make it clear that our rainy day fund is used for temporary purposes, and our capital improvement fund is not a fund that we can use to manage our operational budget.
That's clear. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the council?
I do.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Just real quick, on page 94, we have a list of our capital projects for this fiscal year coming up. Is this all coming out of our reserve funds of $9 million, that's $7 million?
There's approximately, Mayor, members of the council, $4 million that will come out of our reserve fund. The rest of that will be funded through special revenue, such as our highway user revenue fund, As we discussed in the workshops, there's a flat tax on gasoline in the state of Arizona that goes 18% per gallon. That goes into a highway user revenue fund, and then it's proportioned out to local communities, and a percentage is paid based upon Maricopa County and the respective population of the respective communities. So we get a proportion of that pie. So that's the highway user revenue fund. That can only go to street projects. So that's one of those special revenue funds. We have grants coming in about 1.6 million, and our utility cap fund through Southwest Gas. So there's funds like that that help to offset those capital projects.
Got it, all right. So only 4 million out of the, our funds.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Correct. And once again, this is a forecast. That could
Right.
that could change, but that's what we're forecasting.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? There's one person who specifically requested to speak on this item. So when I call your name, please come up to the podium and speak into the microphone, state your name and address. And I'm sorry, I cannot read your last name. Colleen Rose Skirty. Okay, thank you.
Messy writing. Hi, Colleen Rose Skirty, Paint Pony and Carefree. I just want to clarify a couple things, and I apologize. I know you guys have put these budgets out. There's like a ton of pages, so trying to read through everything, understand everything, then come here and hear conversations. I just want to clarify a couple things. There was a mention of replacing the Rural Metro truck and a cost for that. Then there was a comment that we might be able to get a better price with a demo truck. Then there was a mention that we may be able to get a grant. Now, in your budget, the number that you're using, I am assuming is the full replacement of the truck. So if we do get the demo truck, I never heard a price of how much less that was. And if we get the grant, is it a full grant? So if you pass this budget and those things change, do we know? It just happens? That's one question. The other one is on the signs. So there's been discussions, different numbers, signs for businesses, signs for safety, 400,000, 1.2. These are all big, big numbers. Are these signs, are these set? I know that John Mattis made a comment also earlier. Is this part of the general plan in addition to the budget? Is there still anything that we can do with that in feedback on these signs? Because it's such a big ticket that a lot of residents don't know that we really need that. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Good questions. Mr.
Yep.
Neese, maybe you could
Yep.
respond.
Yes, very valid questions. As far as the rural metro truck, that will go through a process, and that process will be taken back to the town council. When we discuss a demo truck, when they're building trucks, they're building them for other agencies. Sometimes there's voids within the delivery line in which they're building it. And so they try and fill the gap by building another truck. That's called a demo truck. And so they obviously have the fixed costs of the employees and the materials that they're using, and they try and fill that gap with the demo truck. That's what we're trying to take advantage of, is one of those gaps within the delivery line. Whether we're successful or not remains to be seen, but each one of the manufacturers of fire trucks have these gaps within their line, and so we're trying to see what's coming available. We don't know at this point in time what's coming available. I have coordinated with Chief Russell to begin the process to see what might be available and the respective specs. Those specs will be reviewed by Rural Metro to ensure that it meets their needs, and then there'll be a future public meeting if it fulfills the needs of what our fire department needs with the town council to authorize the funding for that truck. The costs associated with that truck will go through a state co-op, for example. So there's already a competitive process associated with each one of the manufacturers to get the best price available. So we will ensure what we bring to you is already bid through a cooperative. And so it will go through that competitive process. If it does not qualify, we will not go through it. The other alternative is going through an extensive bid package. I have a bid package that's still sitting on my desk today of specifications that I worked on about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, in which we went out to bid, and then COVID hit, and we couldn't get a fire truck delivered. So Essentially, we can use those specs, we can modify those specs, we can go out to bid with those specs. But there will be a process associated with that. Just because there's a line item in the budget with these large ticket items does not mean that there's unilateral decisions made behind a closed door that we authorize this. As you know, and as you have seen, we bring it back to council to publicly vet it, and that's what we'll do with the fire truck. As far as signage, same thing. What you have on the council agenda tonight is acceptance of a plan that went through a public process, and I'm sure the presentation will include an explanation of what steps it went through. If there is a desire to have additional citizen involvement with that, no harm, no foul. There's no rush to do it. We want to do it right. We want to work with the residents and ensure what's being proposed here is the right fit for Carefree. And I think the consultant did an excellent job in laying out, you know, why we're discussing this, what the need is, and essentially the options for the town to improve the directional and the hierarchy of those signs into the town center. We had a discussion with the town council a number of months ago. One of the outstanding items that they adjusted was there was concern about the number of signs. So they'll discuss that a little bit more in their presentation, that they reduced those number of signs. So the consultant, the staff, we want to make sure what we do here is right. There will be future conversations, and similar to the fire truck, if we authorize any contract in the future, that contract would be bid out, and then that process will be brought in front of you, so then you authorize the funds. Once again, just because the item is in the budget doesn't mean that we're authorizing the funds tonight or in July. That takes on a separate process, that there'll be a public process with the procuring of those respective contracts. So I think that addresses the two questions.
If I may, can you give everybody a sense of, we bought a new truck for $900,000, what would a demo truck potentially be? How much kind of savings would it be, 10%, 20%?
You know, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So it could be 10%, it could be 15%, it could be 20%. It all depends on the respective vendor. So I don't have a number to throw out there, but there is some savings there because you're saving them. They don't obviously want to stop production. So there's an incentive for them to keep the production going.
But even 10% is $900,000.
Yes.
It's real money.
Any other questions or comments? So I just have one comment. We didn't talk about it tonight, but we've talked a lot about compensation. So I would like us to take a look at the possibility of bringing on an analyst just to determine what fair compensation is for the folks that we have employed in the town. And maybe take a look at what are reasonable benchmark communities that we should have an eye on. And I think that'll tell us where we are. Maybe we're over the top, maybe we're where we belong, but it'll really help us get us calibrated so we're doing the right thing here and eliminate doubts that people have.
Mr. Mayor, I have a suggestion, and I'd put this out to each of our department heads, is that I'd like each department to examine their own needs with man hours and with staffing to determine if it's logical to add staff based on the number of hours that you all are working, and what that would look like.
John, just I apologize. Are we bypassing current events?
We already did.
Oh, I missed it.
It was fast. It was fast.
I was going to say it was fast.
It was fast.
I just want to say, Joe Gemmell called me the other night and said, Steve, I saw a mountain lion walk past my car last night, and she was very scared. I just want to let everybody know that if that is true, if that's what she saw for sure, not a bobcat, but a mountain lion, just be aware of that. That's pretty serious. I checked into it. The males grow up to 150 pounds, 0 to 45 miles an hour in about 2 seconds, and they can jump a 12-foot fence standing still. So it's a serious animal, so just be careful.
Okay, very good.
That's
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, so back to the budget discussion. Any other comments related to the budget? Okay, so I would entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2023-05, a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Carefree, Maricopa County, Arizona, adopting the tentative budget and bottom line for the Town of Carefree for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023, and ending June 30th, 2024, and calling for a special meeting and public hearing. Have a motion, please?
Okay, oh,
Go
go ahead.
ahead.
Oh, motion to approve Resolution 2023-05, a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Carefree, Maricopa County, Arizona, adopting the tentative budget and bottom line for the Town of Carefree for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2023, and ending June 30th, 2024, and calling for a special meeting and public hearing.
Second.
Okay, second. Any other comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, very good, thank you. Passes unanimously. And since we can't seem to get done with current events, Mr. Trainer had a comment. So, sir, please come up and state your name, address, in 3 minutes. Thank you.
John Trainer, Carefree resident, 23-year Carefree resident. Mr. Mayor, council, members of the community. We talked about the general plan earlier. Thank you, Stacy, for that update. I want to make sure I get this correct. We don't want to be bass-backward here. The P&Z is essentially newly formed. I don't think they have gone through a couple of meetings yet. It seems to me that it would be better to have the community briefing and workshop before the P&Z workshop. This way, the folks from the P&Z get to hear what the community would like them to do, which I think is part of what their responsibility is. So I'd ask you to consider that in adjusting the schedule for the GMP, for the general plan meetings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that concludes current events for the third time. Item number 10, review, discussion, and possible action to approve item number 11, review, discussion, and possible action to approve technical memorandum D of the comprehensive sign and circulation plan, which includes final sign designs, messaging, and implementation, including costs and phasing.
Thank you, Mayor, members of Town Council. I'm just going to give a very brief introduction, just to point out a couple of important things. We have Rebecca Field of Kimley Horn. She is our consultant. She will carry the rest of the show, so to speak. The reason I want to say a couple of things was first, and it's great about this whole discussion of the general plan. I think, and it was just brought up just a moment ago, as well as understanding why we want these signs. Do we want these signs? Why are we considering these signs? And really, it all goes back to the general plan. The general plan really, I mean, we talk about it as this blueprint for growth and development and Carefree, but it also in a way is staff's, it's almost like our playbook, because it does talk about, well, we want to keep our quality community. We want to have certain aspects of our community. It's not just about land use. It's about a lot of different aspects of town. How to grow, how to manage that growth, about our infrastructure, and it talks a lot about town center. So if you go into the general plan, and I think it's great, I think a lot of people in this room have read the general plan. A lot of communities can't say that, so I think that's just a cool start just right off the bat. But it will talk about town center and how do we get people into town center, and how do we talk about the ease of directing people into town center. That's a discussion in the general plan. From the general plan, it also talks about maintaining sort of our the quality of town center and the town in general, but it does talk a lot about town center, and from that discussion came the Village Center Master Plan. So if you go into that plan, again, it talks about the importance of wayfinding and signage, and as well as talking about the quality of such, of that type of signage and that kind of component of the town. So, and even that was taken a step further this year with last year with the redevelopment plan, just reinforcing the fact that signage is key to a successful town center. We want to get people and the residents know where to go, but we've got visitors, and there's a tax base that needs to be supported by those that come and visit the town. So it just doesn't come out of, wouldn't it be cool to have cool signs in town center? I mean, it comes from a discussion of a plan that's been adopted by the community itself. I also wanted to talk a little bit about, and I'll try to, again, do this a little bit more quickly, sort of the process that we've gone through to get to this point today. We have been doing this since April of 2021 when Kimley Horn was hired and began. We had a stakeholder group, held 11 meetings with that stakeholder group, which are representatives of the community, residents, the businesses, property owners alike. So we try to get a sampling of the community. There's been four P&Z meetings. We've had 2 joint work sessions with both Town Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission. We did a council update just recently, as Gary alluded to, trying to take everybody's comments. We took them from P&Z, we took them from Town Council, and they've been incorporated into that plan. As well as we did multiple HOA meetings with the nearby surrounding communities, the ones that we thought would be most impacted, not just by signage, but also circulation, which is item 12, which we'll talk about, which Steve will do a little preamble to as well. As well as we held this community-wide workshop. So in our opinion, it's been out there for a while. I believe that, you know, we've gone through a robust discussion with the community. It's a quality sign program. They're beautiful signs, and again, this is my opinion, but I think that we've had, again, with the quality consultant, I think that it's going to enhance the overall Carefree Town Center experience, and so this is the kind of thing that quality communities do. So with that said, I'll let Rebecca go through the plan with you.
Thank you, Stacy, and good evening. Just as an introduction, my name is Rebecca Field. I am a landscape architect with Kimley Horn and Associates. I've been in the business for over 20 years, doing wayfinding signage, master planning, park communities for a lot of years here in Southern Arizona. So I am very honored to be here to be able to present this plan. It's been a long time coming, as Stacy mentioned. We've had quite a few conversations amongst all of us on this sign package. So to give a little background, we've had 4 technical memorandums that have been prepared as part of this exercise. We have Tech Memo A, which did an original look at the community, at the signs within the community. We did an inventory of all the existing signs, and there are a lot of existing wayfinding signs within the community. We held meetings with stakeholders to look at the feedback and to look at, you know, what concerns there were within the community. And then we took that information and developed a wayfinding plan, wayfinding strategy, and that was Technical Memorandum B. From that, we decided to get into the meat of the program, which is looking into the sign designs. And we worked quite a bit with the stakeholder groups and with you all to develop those packages. And then lastly, all of that has come together in this Technical Memorandum D, which we've presented in the past, and this is an opportunity to review it one more time prior to moving forward with the plan. So again, we have 2 parts on the agenda today. The first part is a comprehensive sign plan for town center discussion, and then we'll move into the town center concept plan, which is a circulation that is item 12. So looking at the inspiration for the signs, just as a quick background, again, you've seen this before, but looking at the community and looking at the various colors that we see in the community. The olive green, burnt orange, gold colors, those were all developed from the community, from the colors and the textures of your existing items here within Carefree. The rusted brown element is also something that's actually a blow-up view of the sundial itself, so that is taken from the sundial, and it's reminiscent of the history of the town. Those were translated into this graphic form: the olive green, burnt orange, the gold color, the dark chestnut, and the rusted brown. And those have been taken into various different theming levels. So the olive green is for recreational elements. The burnt orange is commercial elements through town. Dark goldenrod is municipal. Rusted brown is the main material again. And then we have dark chestnut as an accent. Again, as an overview, these are some of the inspirations that we drew from for the materials of the signs. We have the metal with the rusted finish, perforated metal panels as you see on the sundial, and then that dark chestnut with gold accents that we see in some of your existing signage. So with that, and again, a lot of iterations moving forward, this is the preferred signage option that has been developed over the course of the last 2 years. So we have welcome gateway signs, and again, we have different color schemes leading to the different destination zones within the town. The green is the recreational, we have commercial, and we have municipal as well. So the first two signs there on the left are the gateway signs. Those are featured elements. You can see the scale with the people there on the right. We have a gateway sign that's in the middle there. It's a very tall vertical element. That is a secondary gateway feature. We have our arterial directional signs. So those would be along the main arterial routes, Tom Darlington and Cave Creek. We have local directional signage as well, and that would be within the town center, along with pedestrian directional signage. These are the two highest priority signs. They will best meet the intent of the wayfinding program. So at a minimum, these are the two sign types that you'll see for the phasing that will be recommended, could be implemented first. These are the rest of the signs in the sign package. You have existing sundial signs that we've heard from feedback from the community, from business owners, that they were not serving the purpose. They were not oriented in the way that was most helpful for passersby and for visitors. So they have been repurposed into the form that you see here and can be used as a pedestrian directional sign as well. There's an option, and some of these are more options and suggestions as part of a sign package. It doesn't mean that all of these have to go in, but these are options that meet the rest of the design intent of this series of signs. We have digital kiosks, pedestrian maps that could be located in parking areas, public parking locations, destination signage highlighting some of the key features that are noted on some of the signs throughout the town, and then an option for parking signage as well in areas of public parking. So moving into the phased approach for implementing these signs. We have phase one, which is the recommendation of adding the arterial vehicular directional signs and then the local vehicular directional signs. Those are the two different colors shown on the screen. The purple is the arterial, the blue is the local vehicular signage. And then we also have an associated cost with what phase one could look like. These costs were generated from working with a fabricator that has done a lot of work in the community. This is just a cost that's proposed as part of this package. It doesn't mean that that's the final cost or that that would be the cost that would actually happen. We would look for bids. We would want to do this, fully in the public process. But these are the costs that have been generated as a example of what these could take. So as you see, the first phase is just upwards of 500,000. Obviously, that is a big number. This is the highest priority and could be the focus of the sign package and serve the purpose of having people understand where to get to some of the destinations within the community. Phase two brings in some of the pedestrian level signage. So we have in the light green pedestrian directional signage. The teal color are the sundial, the repurposed sundial signs. And then we have the gateway signage at the main intersections as well. Again, there's an associated cost with these signs, and it's right under $440,000 to get in these additional sign elements through town. I will note that the background here is the circulation plan that we'll be talking about as part of the next agenda item. To a point that was brought earlier regarding planning for improvements to the streets before we do the signs, that is something that we definitely did take into account because we don't want to have signs in locations that don't make sense. So we've been looking at the circulation. That's part of where the circulation process started from, was really identifying where the trouble points are within the community, finding the best location to make some improvements, and then working the wayfinding signage package around those improvements. Lastly, we have phase three, which again, these are optional signs in the future. We have minor gateways, which were those taller vertical elements that we saw. the potential for a digital kiosk, which is that light orange shape. We have the triangles or the pedestrian maps, and then destination signs as well, all with an associated cost. And I see it's cut off on the screen there, but I'm not sure how to scroll up. Thank you. So yeah, 232,000 on that. So this is a summary of all the different signs, and again, as part of a wayfinding package, what we're looking at is creating a design intent. It doesn't mean that every sign is installed. It's a process to begin moving forward as you're looking at implementing in a phased way. So that is what this is suggesting here as this overall image. There appear to be a lot of signs, but if you look at the existing signs within the community, there are more than this existing. So we would be taking those signs down and replacing them with a cohesive package that matches the look and feel that we've heard that the community is in favor of. I will pause there and take any questions
Any
so far.
questions from council?
Well, I'm just gonna assume that the cost listed includes removal, installation,
It
and
does,
so forth.
correct.
Any maintenance with these signs?
So the materials for these signs have been identified as being very high durability materials. These are, again, the fabricator that we spoke with has done a lot of signs within town. So he's very aware of the sun and the way that the elements can treat these signs. He's designing with materials that are a little bit on the higher end so that maintenance is reduced. That's why you do see some of the costs the way that they are. These are meant to be an investment and something that, is of the quality that you would expect within the community. And so, with that being said, there is a higher price tag, but it comes with the benefits of lower maintenance down the line.
I assume the frames all look like they're out of metal, and then there's a
Correct.
wood or something for the specific signs?
Yeah, the frames are out of metal, the signs themselves would be out of a high density material as well. It wouldn't be wood, it would be like a high density panel.
Thank you.
Could you give us an idea of the life of these signs through normal, weathering, wear and tear?
So my understanding in speaking with the fabricators are that these could be, 20, 30, they're long-lived signs.
Bertram, right?
Bertram,
Yeah.
correct.
Did we get bids on these? Did we get 3 or 4 bids on these? I don't know anything about how they're made, but
Yeah.
I know a little bit about fabrication. I'm
Sure.
a little blown away with the costs.
Yeah,
be
so
honest
these
with
are
you.
costs that are, again, as part of this planning process, a planning tool to start looking at budgets. During implementation, there would absolutely need to be a bidding process so that we're making sure we have the most competitive bids available for this. But this is a vendor that has done a lot of work here in town and is familiar with your processes and your codes. So they were our best tool to evaluate a cost for planning purposes.
So it's just to get us calibrated and
Correct,
roughly what these
correct.
things would cost.
Yes,
So what this is it's, what we're being asked to do tonight is at the end of the day, accept a report.
it's a report. It's not to say these signs will be installed tomorrow or anywhere like that. It's to say we appreciate the intent. This is the direction that we'd like to move forward with as far as the overall sign package. How they get implemented, which signs get implemented, clearly that's a lot more discussion would need to happen in
We have
advance
to
of
come
that. Absolutely.
before the council again,
Absolutely,
at a minimum.
absolutely, yes.
I had another question. Hopefully I'm not getting ahead of you, but on page 12, it mentions, it suggests that the town begin working with private property owners to expand pedestrian network and promote increased workability within the town center. So are there private property issues here based on what you're proposing to us?
So when we get into the next agenda item, it does have the circulation plan, which has some new sidewalk connections. There are some locations that we would need to talk with property owners to look at some of the parking improvements that are being recommended. So that's more what we're referring to in that section. where it's specifically the circulation improvements.
Later on in the report, it talks about taking an inventory of existing signs and then understanding the extent of signs within the area and to evaluate the effectiveness of the sign design or placement. So are you talking about the effectiveness of the existing signs?
So that was one of the first steps that we did as we looked at the existing signs. We understood from speaking with the stakeholder groups that one of their top concerns that they heard from either their customers or as people walking through the town, that they felt a lot of the signage was confusing. It didn't match one another. It had a non-cohesive look. So we did take a look at all the signs to see, are there some that do work? Are there some that we could salvage and keep as part of this process? Because the cost is certainly something that we are aware of and that we would like to reduce as much as possible. So when we looked at the existing signs, the sundials, for example, are a really nice design. They weren't serving in the function that was as helpful as it could have been to get the direction that is needed into some of these different areas. So that's why we're repurposing them and using them where we can. We're also looking at, the gateways, the large arches that you have in town. Those are staying. Those are something that is, they're iconic features. They were very expensive. They were, something that really is an item that needs to work with this sign package. And so that's where some of the design elements have also come from.
Okay, thank you.
Rebecca, you mentioned that there were 7 stakeholder sessions,
11.
11?
Yes.
Anyone here in the room part of that? All right.
Okay. Any other questions?
No.
I have one other question. On the one of these pages, page 34, it talks about lack of handicap parking. So are we meeting the minimum required handicap parking? Maybe Mr. Neese can tell us that. I mean, this came up as a point. Just want to make sure we have the handicap parking we're supposed to have.
I don't have the answer to that. This was done back in 2000 when the town center was revamped and additional on-street parking was done. But I believe that everything met the standards when that was done back then. Don't think the standards have changed since then, but I have not done an assessment since they were done 20 plus years ago.
Yes, this came up in stakeholder input, so it may be more of a feeling than a numerical count relative to the law. But, okay, fair enough. Okay, any other comments or questions? Becky, you had some more?
No, I was just going to end with this closing. Again, the price is something that we want to be very transparent about and something that we want to show. This is a summary of all 3 phases together.
Okay, so thank you very much, Rebecca.
Thank
Good
you.
report and good presentation.
Thank you.
So now we have a few folks who would like to speak on the subject. So when I call your name, please come up, state your name and address, and speak into the microphone. So first up is Miss Colleen Rose Scruti.
Colleen Rose Scurry, 8615 East Cape Coast, Brighton, Carefree. Just a question, because it's come up several times in this meeting, and I heard it once before tonight. Who are the stakeholders, and how are those appointed or selected?
Okay, good question. Miss Wendy Mattis. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Michael Braun.
My name is Michael Braun. I live on North Beaver Road in Carefree. I just answered the first question with total signage cost of $1.2 million. I would much rather see that money put into an economic development fund and bring businesses into Carefree downtown, rather than spending $1.2 million for what I can't see as a purpose. Because as the lady just before me said, you could walk around town and see all of this. You can't miss the hotel.
Is there a hotel here, really?
I don't see a purpose in spending $1.2 million. Who are we trying to bring in with these signs? I don't see where we're gonna get benefit, cost benefit analysis out of $1.2 million of signs. We got enough signs around here, everybody can find it if they want. Better use economic development fund, $1.2 million into that. Bring some other restaurants into downtown. That brings people in, that generates sales tax. Signs don't generate sales tax.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Jan Neal.
Jan Neal, Boulder's Eagle Claw, Carefree resident. So this is going to sound a bit redundant, but what really caught my attention was April 2021. That's over 2 years ago. There is no dishonor in looking at a project that seemed to maybe make sense. I don't know what was going on at the time. Maybe it made perfect sense back then. But I don't think it makes sense now for the reasons that the people before me cited. We have an outdated general plan. What is our priority now? What if we accepted this proposal as a completed proposal and tabled it? Get through the general plan and listen to the residents on what we want and look at our priorities and then decide where that fits in. I'm sure a lot of people spend a lot of cycles doing this, the consultants, and Stacy, I know you probably have spent a lot of time on this. But there is no dishonor in recognizing that things change and that maybe things are different right now. And so I would ask respectfully that we table it and postpone any action on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Margaret McKernan.
Thank you very much for your description. I agree with you that a lot of work you've gone through. My concern, like everybody else, is that this is a small town. And I live in a condo right across the street. So I can walk over to Charleston.
Thank you, Peggy. Ariane Busser. You have an issue with the microphone? Just 1 second, we'll see if we can get this thing fixed. No, we want to make sure that the folks at home can hear.
Hello? Okay. Hi, can everyone hear me? Yes, I can. Thank you for lending me your chair. Hi, my name is Ariane Busser, and I'm a resident here in Carefree. I just want to say I'm really encouraged by the residents speaking out tonight. When I first heard about the 1.2 sign for the signs, I was flabbergasted. I have been a consultant. I know what consultants can charge. The fact that this project has been going on for a couple of years, I can only guess at the amount of consultancy fees that have been spent on this, where that could very well have been used for something to better the town, such as economic development, bringing in new businesses, such as purchasing the 48 acres of land and turning it into a community park for all residents and visitors alike to enjoy. That alone would actually bring a lot of business to the town. I actually used to live in Sausalito, California, and I'm sure you've all heard of it. It is a town just north of the Golden Gate Bridge in the Bay Area of San Francisco. Talk about tourists coming there. And let me tell you, the signage there was minimal. Everyone knew where to go. They had a couple of signs that said downtown center, shopping, things like that, but it was not over the top. And millions of people would come to visit Sausalito every year. It was a very, very popular destination, and there were not a lot of lost people. Here in Carefree, we are much smaller. And I can tell you, I have not seen any wandering people not really sure where to go in Carefree. So once again, I'm very concerned about the lack of fiscal responsibility when it comes to even proposing that number on a budget. And the fact that we're having this meeting now, knowing that the fiscal year starts at the beginning of July, is kind of crazy because that number is on the budget that's being proposed. Why not propose like half of that? And then say, okay, for phase one, we're going to start with this number and see how we go. But the fact that you're putting in the whole enchilada and it's 1.2 million now, that may go up, right? So I just have a lot of concerns about that, and I think other residents have that as well. If you actually did a poll with residents here in Carefree and you mentioned that $1.2 million for signs, I think a lot of residents would be a little bit concerned that that was the number floating around. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to what the residents are saying. Please be fiscally responsible, use the money that you have better, and make good decisions for the future of this town. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. John Mattis.
I think this, it's working. Good work, Jerry. You've got to know your history, and I don't think a lot of people here know the history of this 2020-11 resolution that started this whole thing. It was a work strategies. 4 different strategies were approved. What was also approved was a development committee where public input and minutes and notices were supposed to have been given out. That committee was never formed. In January of 2021, or 2, take that back, 2021, item 11 on the agenda was the Economic Development Director introduced a number of people. No council action necessary. When I did a walk around with the Development Director and I asked, when is this committee going to be appointed? He goes, oh, it was. I think that was in April, as a matter of fact. And what amazed me when I went back and found that item 11, I had to go to the Attorney General. I had to complain on an open meeting violation because the council had approved it. It's supposed to have been a committee. they didn't ever do anything with it. And I remember February 14th, 2022, I was late for our dinner, I'm sorry. I was in front of the Planning and Zoning Committee, actually at that door, because I couldn't put a mask on, so I had to stand outside with a microphone. And they were then being told, you're taking this over. So what minutes were taken? What information was given to them on all of these meetings that were already conducted on the signage, on things that nobody knew about? There was no public comments, no public meetings. So to push this forward now, I think is wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Carrie Johnson.
Thank you. Hello. My name is Carrie Johnson. I live on East Primrose Path, and I am part of the Carefree Institute. We are a think tank of local residents, retailers, artists, and entrepreneurs who are committed to crafting a new vision to make Carefree an exceptional place to live, work, and visit. We respectfully request that the vote to move forward with the sign package be delayed. Many Carefree residents are currently out of town, and many others have not had a chance to review this plan in detail. If we have learned anything from the recent tax vote, it's that we need to communicate differently. We need to be a town that actively listens to residents and includes them in decision making. We are a small town with 3,600 residents and limited financial resources. Every penny needs to be well spent. Let's focus on getting the town cleaned up and in order before we proceed with the signage and development plans. The Carefree Institute hopes that you will hit the pause button on this vote for this expenditure on behalf of the residents and retailers of Carefree. Thank you.
So that's our last public comment. Mr. Neese, would you like to comment or any of these items? Or maybe I can start with who are the stakeholders? And Stacy or Rebecca could answer that question.
Yes, so the group was put together. We have representatives from the community, from council, from planning and zoning. So it was pulled together. Cheryl Croyer, not the singer Sheryl Crow, but Cheryl Croyer. Lynn Hitchin when she was a planning and zoning commissioner. We also had Tom Cross, Susie Dymick, who at the time was the town ambassador program. She is now a planning and zoning commissioner. Joe Gemmel, who is the owner of the English Tea Room. Michelle Hutchins, owner of Gallery Michelle. We had a resident who was a traffic engineer, Alex Marina Nelson. Todd Cooley, who was a manager of the Hampton Inn at that time. Shelley Spence, who was a publisher of Images Magazine. And then Mike Hennelly, who was owner of the UPS store. So I think what we tried to do is when you pull a stakeholder group together, we just tried to figure out who we thought might best represent the community at the time. We really felt that this was focused towards the business owners. You know, they had let us believe that, and now that there are more people in town center, I understand for those of us that are familiar with town center, it seems easy. We get a lot of questions in town hall of where to find things. You see sometimes confusion driving on Easy Street. And these are our observations. I'm not diminishing anybody else's opinion by any means. I'm just telling you from our perspective. And so I think we felt like that was kind of the foundation of try to figure out how we could better encourage traffic into town center. I know there's a belief that it's fine the way it is. We've just heard from businesses that are always looking to see how they can get people to better find their place of business, as well as just sort of understand how to circulate through town center as a visitor and find some of these interesting businesses that we have. So it was just part of the process pulled together in-house to, again, try to cover who we felt kind of represented the community.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead, sir. I'm sorry, Mayor. I was just going to answer, I think also, if I'm not correct, or please correct me, Gary, but I don't believe the whole budget for the signage package is in this year's budget. It's a portion of the signage cost.
Mayor, members of council, what we have within the budget is $600,000 for the town center. That doesn't mean that we spend any of that on anything. It's just a line in there to make investments in the town center. It could be with signage, it could be with sidewalks, it could be with landscaping, it could be something in the town gardens. But essentially, it's a placeholder to ensure that we have the funds budgeted to make those investments. So that is not attributed specifically to this signage. The plan does call for $1.2 million. That doesn't mean that that plan is executed. Once again, this was a process that was conducted to look at the hierarchy of signage within the town and direct people that were not familiar with the town to the various businesses within the town itself. So it was a way to create a hierarchy to our signage, which is one of the best practices in any shopping center. Any mall that you go to, you have a hierarchy of signage. So as we went through the economic development plan, this was an outgrowth to that plan and one of the deliverables. At the end of the day, that doesn't mean that we have to execute any of these things. That doesn't mean that you have to move forward with this tonight. You can table this and have more community dialogue. There's nothing wrong with that. We can certainly have more community dialogue around signage.
Gary, do you keep 600 annually, roughly, in the budget just for those that item, those kind of items?
That varies. So previous years, you know, it was stucco and paint repair within the gardens. We're going to continue on with that program. But yes, it will vary. There's budget items that vary.
All right, thank you.
And just to add upon what Gary was saying, again, if the decision is to have more community discussion, we're very open to that. And if there's anybody who is interested in being a part of the process, being on the stakeholder group, a lot of times we just try to do what we think is best and try to include who we think represents the community. But if anybody is interested in being a part of the process, being a part of a working group, very happy to take names, email addresses, and be a part of the conversation as it's happening, absolutely.
So this, excuse me?
I'm making a sincere offer.
Yeah, so if anyone's interested, you're going to have more stakeholder meetings?
We can, absolutely. We can have more community discussion, more workshops on it, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. We had a couple other comments come up for signs, so I'm willing to entertain them. Mr. John Trainer?
Mayor and council, members of the audience, John Trainer, Carefree resident. As a person that walks 7 days a week, twice a day, probably a couple hours a day through the garden, both sides, I could tell you that in the last 5 to 8 years, the garden has deteriorated tremendously. I have photos on my phone I could show you this evening of areas that are in significant need of rehabilitation, sidewalks that have been cracked for years, walls that are cracked and peeling. And I know that I heard something earlier in a budget meeting about painting or whatever. I think if there's $635,000, whatever that number was, you're going to need it for the garden. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Jackie, sorry, Jackie, I can't pronounce your last name. Jackie. Sorry.
Hi. I'm the short one. Anyway, I'm Jackie Sanashi, and I live at 1159 Beavertail in the Boulders. And I've been talking with different members of the council over the years, and we've spoken. And one of my big concerns was the gardens, because I'm into landscaping big time, and I'm good at it. And you can blame the dogs, but that area where the stage is, and we have the elevated gardens that I can pull weeds out of because the landscapers don't get the weeds out of it. there's really a lack of maintenance that's gone on since we lost the person that gave us the beautiful gardens. He sold his business. And I was told by one of the store owners that he had a gal there every week taking care of those gardens, almost every day maintaining those gardens. It was her passion. And we have let it totally fall apart. We haven't put granite in there the whole time I've lived here, the 22 years. We have black granite in one spot, and we have tan granite somewhere else. And that's pathetic. And to look at dirt and weeds is inappropriate. And, but anyway, what I want to talk about is signage. I've been a volunteer for about 10 years with the Cave Creek Carefree Tourism Bureau, and I also was in the office here for a year, and directing visitors on where to go. And because of my being in the Cave Creek Tourism Bureau, we have a Carefree section, and we direct people to Carefree. And before we had the big arch signs, it was really hard to tell them how to get in. And I think those arch signs, even though some people don't like them, they've been a big help to make people going to Cave Creek realize there's a town behind this street. And they don't know it. They know about Cave Creek. They sort of know about Carefree, but they know more about Cave Creek. And so those signs, number one, were a good idea, and they did cost a lot of money. Never take them down, please. But the one thing I've noticed, being a person that directs people to go places in Carefree, is Spanish Village is historic. It's beautiful. It's got great restaurants. It's got galleries that are wonderful. And reality is, people go to the tea room. They're there every day. All the visitors go up Easy Street. For years, I've wondered why we don't have anything that tells them about Spanish Village. And that's a couple blocks away. And they're strangers to our town. And that's the one area that they don't know about. And it's a crime.
So 2 minutes and 15 seconds.
And it has a lot of character. So at least put a sign that tells people there's galleries, there's restaurants, there's shopping in Spanish Village, and denote the year it was developed. At least do that, and that isn't gonna cost $600,000. And then spend the rest of the money in the gardens, repair the sidewalks, the paint. The plantings are pathetic.
Okay.
So
Time's
those
up,
are my,
Jackie. Thank
my
you.
strong
Jackie.
suggestions.
Mr. Don Little?
Thank you, Don Little, Carefree, Canyon Creek Estates, and a couple of business owners. First of all, as far as the signs go, I've been all pro sign. I'm excited about new signage. I like the idea. When I saw the numbers tonight, though, I didn't like the idea so much. It did seem very expensive, and I would imagine Bertram, I think, can do better than that, but anyway. You know, somebody mentioned the park, somebody mentioned, I know Steve, we've been working on the bike lanes and stuff. I'd rather see us spend money on doing things that attract people, and it's not sign, like the lady that said she was from California, that said if you have places people want to see, people want to visit, people want to recreate, you don't need a whole lot of signage, right? I mean, people are going to come because they heard about the bike lanes, or they heard about the great park that we had, or whatever the facilities are. As far as signage, I love the idea of Spanish Village, better signage, because I have a business in Spanish Village. But the one thing I will tell you is that right now, you know, and I know some people had mentioned that we're looking at data from a couple of years ago as well, right? The restaurants, Augie's here? Yes. We're crushing it. Is that not right?
This winter was very great.
Even now, the restaurants are killing it. We need to find a way to attract people to the other businesses. A lot of the galleries, a lot of the smaller shops, like in Spanish Village, I feel bad sometimes because they're not getting enough traffic. So there's definitely something needs to happen to get these smaller businesses some traffic. I'm not here to promote my businesses, but you know, I've worked with Steve a lot with the town and talked to John a lot as well. You know, I kind of made a push for getting music a big deal here in the town. And so now Augie and the guys at Athens have music every Friday night. We started music every Friday night at our restaurant, and just this last week, we now call it Friday Night Jam Sessions. We had one hell of a amazing night this last Friday. We had great jazz music. We had a young girl, maybe 25 years old, come up there and sing her own music. She crushed it. We need to try to get her an album deal after that. We had a 10-year-old girl come up there and play the piano. Another gentleman came up and played the harmonica. And the energy that is off of that is amazing right now. I have all of these people that want to come and play music on our patio. We did finally apply for a liquor license, so I look for your blessing on that when that comes through, by the way. And so we will be opening for more dinners later in the future. Sorry about all the promoting here. And the last thing I'd like to say is everybody leaves here tonight. I just want to say that I appreciate everything everybody does here. I know you all work very hard, and I get very frustrated. I'm a judgmental person, and I'm working on that. But I do get sick of emails and social media that attack everybody here personally. The personal attacks need to stop. I see the faces even in here. And believe me, there's times where I have to hold back my facial expressions, right? But when we leave here tonight, can everybody please stay off their computer and not attack people personally? When I opened that bicycle shop, shortly after I opened that bicycle shop, I'm going along here. Shortly after I opened that bicycle shop, I finally signed up for Yelp, right? I signed up for Yelp. I get one review. It may be a lady in this room. She gave me a 1-star review. You know why? Because I had a John Crane sign in my door. I had a Cheryl Croyer sign in my door. She called them slime balls. I just double-checked the comments. She called them slime balls and gave me a 1-star review. And then she slammed the hotel and she slammed some other places. Can we not do that? I know everybody here, people of good character. We all want to do the right thing. We all obviously have different ideas. Let's talk about those ideas, but let's not slam each other. That's it.
Don? It's the last public comment. So any comments or questions from council?
So I would just like to say, I think it's too easy to drive by our town. The signs blend in, and it's too easy to do it. And I think that, at least on the arterials, it's important that we get people to notice that there's something inside. So, and also, we're not here to approve $1.2 million of spending on signs. It was giving us an idea of an oh wow moment, but that's not what we're doing here tonight. But I do think it's too easy to drive by our town if you don't know what's inside.
Yeah, I think we can certainly update or improve our signage game, but maybe we have to keep it in some kind of bounds.
Yeah.
I'd really like to see a scaled down project about half the cost if it's possible. Speak up, please. I'd like to see a project that's about half the cost of what the 1.2 million, something scaled back. Maybe we don't need as many signs, maybe the cost of the signs. It's hard without looking at a bill of materials to understand what it costs to build these things and what's competitive in the marketplace. So just thinking out loud, maybe we ought to just hit the pause button on this and study it further and not jump.
Yeah, I think that was a comment made by Carrie Johnson. Personally, I think she's right on.
I think we should hit the
And
pause button.
And so the town can conduct some additional workshops, get public input, get the word out so everyone knows what's going on, that the workshops are happening. Stakeholders can reconvene, and just collect some additional information. Yeah, Mr. Propopek.
Mayor, thank you. And I know there's just been a lot of comment. And first and foremost, I want to say this has been one of the most pleasant conversations I've seen in a council meeting, and I want to thank everybody here. I think this is important stuff that we're working on. And what's difficult about the conversation that we have as it relates to signage and circulation and town center is it's a lot to take in. There's a lot of things that are happening, and it all interacts and fits together. As Mr. Mattis had pointed out, we're working on circulation issues, and that could impact signage. The one thing I want to kind of leave people with, and as we make decisions, is that what we don't want to do is sell ourselves short on what the ultimate goal is. And so if we have a $1.2 million signage package, it doesn't mean you have to do that today. It doesn't mean you have to do it tomorrow. It doesn't mean you have to do it over the next 10 years. What we're doing here is we're trying to set the overall vision for what it is we want to see ultimately in the town. And it may not even be us that makes the decisions ultimately on some of these things that get implemented. But what we're trying to do is say we are a higher level of quality. And what we want to look at is if what's the appropriate level of signage, and then if it has to be phased appropriately, and we have to balance out how these decisions are made versus other things, whether we're going to be looking at revitalization projects or even economic development funds. One of the things I'll be asking for is the idea of how we can do public-private partnerships where private property owners and the public can come together, kind of like the idea of an economic development fund where we can work together collaboratively to improve the properties in town center. Resources are going to be limited, but let's not limit what the ultimate vision is when we start having these conversations. But I do think it's appropriate that we continue to have them. And if we need to, this isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. And that's what I'm trying to get at, but let's not sell ourselves short. So, and a lot of the comments that we do get from stakeholders is, and it's great that we get the residents because it's extremely important because they use a lot of the things, but we also have the businesses here. And if the fire vote told us anything, 1/3 of our sales tax that comes in funds our fire. And so the businesses are an integral part of the conversation, including the property owners here as well. So there's a lot of things that we need to consider. Nothing is going to be decided fast. Would never ask you to decide anything quickly. And if we're going to spend lots of money, we have to be very conscious about how that's going to impact the other things that we want to do. And so as we make these decisions, we kind of put the whole package together. But it's almost unfair to not have had the next part of this conversation, because I think that helps put some of this together in context. So I just wanted to bring that up with the group here, that's where we're at. And I agree with Stacy. The more people we get involved in these conversations, the better. And it isn't about getting the people we want to get the information from. It's about getting the full picture of the information from the people of this community. So I just wanted to let you know that is the intention here.
Yep, well said, thank you. Okay, any other comments from council?
I have to, if I may, John,
so-
just one, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so I sat on the original committee panel when we appointed Kimley Horn to come in and consult and provide all the information over time. And the objective was over the long term. What does it look like to do it right? And right means replacing getting the consistency, getting items in that will withstand time. And this is a result of that. Now, is it scalable? Yeah, it is. It most definitely is. There are things that can be done in there. But what you're presenting to us was what we had talked about 3 years ago in doing it over time and doing it in phases potentially, and that's what we have. So thank you for that.
Okay, Mr. Hatcher.
I just want to say to everybody tonight, this was great, and I'm really glad you're all here, and we want to hear from you and participate. And so I think it's one of our better sessions we've had tonight. Although it was entertaining that as we went on the night, everybody's continuing to fill out. It's like, whoa! No, but it's all good. It's all good, and this is what we need to do because it's a team effort, and we're all living in the same village. So let's work together on it. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, very good. Okay.
What, I don't get applause?
Your day will come. So I would entertain a motion to table the technical memorandum D of the comprehensive sign and circulation plan.
I make the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Item number 12. Presentation and discussion with Rebecca Field of Kimley Horn, consultant for comprehensive sign and circulation plan, to include updating the town council and planning and zoning commission. So welcome to the planning and zoning commission. On the plan's circulation strategies, and to include soliciting feedback for incorporation into the final draft of the project assessment. This is for informational purposes only. No action will be taken. Comments from the public will be taken.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, Council. So Stacy and I work very closely together, and in a lot of cases, we tag team this. And signage was already in place when I started, and she had started the relationship with Kimley Horn. And one of the things that became very evident as we talked to the community, we talked to the businesses, was that circulation, which is also included in the general plan, which is also included in the Village Center Master Plan, was something that we were to address. The other thing comes down to parking. That when we look at how we want to grow the town center, parking is going to be something that we need to definitely address. And especially if we add more restaurants in, the parking requirements for restaurants actually has a larger impact than just your general office or commercial. And so those are things that Kimley Horn has been looking at. Those are things we've been looking at as a staff. And the signage does play into all of this, because if you look up here, we have a lot of parking. But how does it connect back to the Easy Street businesses? And so those are the things that we just need to look at as we look at the signage and circulation together. The other piece of the circulation really also comes down from a lot of the other comments we get from the community, and that is, how do we better connect the community? How do we better connect neighborhoods to the town center itself? How do we create even recreational amenities? So it could be a bike trail. And then I think the biggest one was really, it just comes down to the safety. We were doing the crosswalk study, and so we had a lot of these little projects going together. And again, it comes to the idea of, how do we create a comprehensive vision plan that we really want to aspire to, of what really is going to drive all the things that we'd like to see, and particularly slowing traffic down, making it safer to cross the roads, and making this a more viable place for people to be able to conduct business, or to be able to recreate, or to be able to just walk in and get their mail. And so that's really what the crux of this whole discussion really is about, and why we're pursuing this circulation piece, as well as making sure that we have the adequate parking for the types of uses and users we'd like to see in the town center as we move forward. So with that, I just want to leave to the consultant here, and Rebecca.
Thank you. So to follow up on what Steve said, a lot of this is based on what we have heard, again, from the stakeholder groups, from the community members that we've spoken to. What we've heard is that circulation throughout the town center is unclear. The traffic circles are confusing. So they are not roundabouts, they're not really traffic circles, there's something in between. They're very confusing, and there was a need to look at that further. There was also many comments about needs for additional parking. As part of our process, we did do a parking analysis, and I'll speak to that here in a minute, but that was one of the items that we heard. We also heard from business owners that it is hard to find some of the businesses here. There are some that are well known, as has been mentioned already in some of the discussion, but there are others that are not as well known or not as easy to come across as you are traveling through town center. There was also a significant lack of sidewalks and accessible connections within the community. So these were all the items that, as we're looking at town center, as we've looked at the Village Center Master Plan that has been prepared over time, these are all items that we're needing to address to make a safer, more livable environment for us as residents and visitors to be able to use the town center effectively. So in hearing that information, we started doing some analysis, and I do have with me one of our engineers. Kimley Horn does transportation planning, engineering, lots of different sides. So we have parking experts. Lena is our traffic and roadway engineer that can also speak to any questions. But we looked at on-street parking. We did quite a detailed analysis of the parking. What we found in looking at parking is that you actually do have a lot of parking spots, and it's the event times that are clearly a concern. But during normal operations, you have parking. The problem is not many people know exactly where to park that best meets where they want to go. So sometimes you'll have a parking spot that is seen as the preferred spot. That's where everyone wants to park. And so there's a perception there's not enough parking because those spots are taken. There is parking elsewhere, but again, how do people get from those viewed as less desirable spots to the areas that they would like to go? So it's an issue of distribution, more so than actual quantity, and that's what our parking analysis found. We also looked at the bike lanes and how to make the area more effective for bicycle users of all abilities, not just on-street bike riders, but people that feel a little bit more comfortable off-street as well. So we looked at opportunities to have off-street bike pathways. We looked at pavement markings and did an analysis of, you know, the effectiveness of some of the markings that are on the streets. Tom Darlington and Cave Creek have various lane patterns that we can talk about, you know, that goes from 2 lanes to 1 lane and kind of back and forth. So we looked at some of the issues with some of the traffic as well. Crosswalks, as mentioned previously, there was a crosswalk analysis done to take a look at where crosswalks were warranted and where they may be needed. We also looked at the sidewalk condition, the accessible ramps, driveway locations, and considered the potential of a shared use path. The way we did that were through field visits. We did quite a few field visits. We had significant amount of data collection. We did an in-depth dive on some of the roadway geometry, which we won't get into today, but that is the background and some of the engineering behind some of these ideas that you'll see here on the screen in a moment. We looked at traffic patterns as well, and we did hear stakeholder input and what it is that was confusing within Town Center. So all of that being said, this is the Carefree Town Center concept plan. I'll go through this in detail. I know it's hard to see on the screen, so I'm going to flip to the next page, which hopefully you can see a little bit better. But I'm just going to go from the north to the south, highlighting some of the improvement areas. So for orientation, we have up at the top, we have the intersection of Cave Creek and Tom Darlington, where you see the big circle with the number 8. That is that intersection there, just for orientation again. North is up. So we have a few different numbers that are showing on the side, and I'm going to go ahead and move really from north to south because I think that's going to make the most sense rather than look at the numbers, but you can always refer to the chart there on the side as well. So as we're coming in on Cave Creek and Tom Darlington, we have heard a lot of input about that intersection in particular and how challenging it is. So what we're looking at is an enhanced intersection in that location. What that enhanced intersection looks like is still to be determined. That's something that requires, again, more analysis because we want to do it right. We don't want to just make a decision that is not in keeping with the traffic patterns and some of the future growth that may be seen along these routes. Some of the options that have been talked about, one is a roundabout. And so I know that may be a controversial thing, but what you see in the traffic circles are not roundabouts. They're not true traffic circles. They don't function like a actual roundabout that is designed would function. So, you know, again, we have our engineer here that can answer questions on that, but the roundabout is something that could be considered. It would require a study, and it would be something that could enhance the safety of that intersection. But that's an intersection that needs some significant attention. And when you see the red circle on the plan, you'll see 2 more. Those are the 3, what we call the gateway intersections, that really need to have enhanced focus. And we're not in the position to make those recommendations right now. We're just making it something that should be discussed in future conversations. So looking again, moving south from that intersection, we have Tom Darlington on the left, Cave Creek on the right. You'll notice some lane configuration changes and some modifications to the roadway. One of the items that we've been looking at as part of this process is simplifying both of those arterials to 1-lane roads. We've looked at the traffic, we've looked at the concern about congestion. What we found through the data is that a 1-lane roadway section here would work. What it does is it offers the opportunity to potentially provide some on-street parking. It's shown, and again, it may be hard to see, but it's shown in a parallel parking configuration for the most part along the sides of some of these roadway areas. You'll also notice the green line. Those are dedicated bike routes. And then the black, I don't know if I can point on here, but the black heavy line with the white dashes, that is a multi-use path. Gary, you can point, that would be helpful, thank you. So that is a multi-use path. That would be a separated bike path that is off the road, has a landscape buffer in between, and provides a safer environment for all types of users. So again, with the roadway modifications that are being considered, there's an opportunity to enhance the landscape in those areas. There's an opportunity to incorporate a slower traffic pattern through this core, which is important to safety. If you have people crossing, if you have a lot of activity, we need to slow traffic down. And that's the intent of this road configuration as it is. So looking back at the, just south of that intersection where the number 8 is, you'll notice a parking area. I'm gonna move forward right here. This is a suggestion for the existing alley that is there behind the Shell. So there's an opportunity to include some additional parking in that location. Again, understanding that parking is perceived as an issue, it's something that in this area we think parking could work, and is shown in this graphic. Moving south, there's a few other areas that I'll draw your attention to. There is, where the number 3 is, there's that existing landscape area that has opportunity for more improvements. That intersection is a little bit difficult to navigate, so we're looking at improvements for that intersection. And then as you continue south on Ho Hum Road, where that next star is, you'll notice another change, and that's item 6, where it would be a pedestrian corridor, just where the red kind of markings are, not through the parking areas, but just a small stretch between the pavilion and the gardens that would be closed to through traffic to provide that pedestrian connection from the pavilions to the gardens. There would still be emergency access. There would be removable bollards that could be located in those locations that would allow for, again, access as needed, but in general, it would be closed to through traffic just in that stretch where you can see the number 6 and the little bit of the red coloring there. So another change that is part of this plan is a closure of a driveway that is heading into the bank that's right in this location, just south of where that star is that came up. And again, that's in an effort to reduce the number of driveway conflicts with some of the parking areas within Town Center. It's a minor change, there's still access, but that is a suggestion that is being made as part of this plan. Other items that I'll note in this plan, we have new sidewalk, and that's in the dark, the kind of the black color. So you'll notice throughout the town center there are some opportunities for connections where there are currently no sidewalks. We also have a tan color that's shown in the number 5 designation. It's a designated town center pedestrian route, and it would run through the gardens. It would provide an accented walkway space that really could focus pedestrian travel through the area. There's another change at the intersection of Wampum Way as you enter into Town Center. That's where one of the internal traffic circles are. That is one that, again, is functioning poorly right now, so there is the potential to add a more traditional intersection at that location rather than the traffic circle design. So that is a new consideration to what some of you have seen on this plan. And then another item that I'd like to point out as part of this plan, this where this last star came up is where Sunshine Way currently is. And as part of the Village Center master plan, there was a recommendation to close that to allow for the potential future redevelopment of that area where it's shown as number 9. And then the area just to the south of that. So it's still maintained as parking as shown in this plan, but it is closed off from accessing Cave Creek directly in that location. So a few other items that we'll point out. The number 7 is just existing parking, potential to have events in those locations. We understand that that is private property. It's something that has the parking available, and so there could be some staging areas in those locations. Also within the number 8, the big red circle at the top, and you'll see 2 more. That's where we would have a welcome feature. If it was, for example, a roundabout, there could be a feature in the center of that that would really mark those key locations into the town. We also have what we're calling designated pedestrian entries. Doesn't mean that pedestrians couldn't go in any of the other intersections, but this is where, when we look back at the signage, we're directing pedestrians to enter where you see the number 1 on either side, both at Carefree Drive and at Wampum Way. And then we're looking to get vehicles into town center faster rather than go through those main pedestrian gateways. So when you see the number 2 on here, that's the vehicular gateway features, where we're getting people off the arterials into the town center and keeping less vehicles from going into the more crowded pedestrian spaces. I'll pause here before I move south to see if there are any comments or questions.
I have a question,
Yes.
if I could, thank you. The last star just south of the number 9 there, are you suggesting?
Yes.
To close that off from Cave Creek Road, and what would be the driver for that again, please?
So the driver for that, again, is to reduce the number of driveway intersections. One of the items that was noted when we were looking at the safety of the roads is that there are a lot of driveway intersections, and those cause confusion as far as where do you turn in, what's the best route to turn into town center. That was one that, again, if that is closed, it really opens those 2 parcels, both to the north and south, as a possible development space that in the future could look different than what it is today.
Yeah, in other words, have them drive through the areas that have all the signage that gives them direction where to go, where you go, you come out down here, and there's nothing, and they wander.
Right.
Got it.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do we have an alternative route for folks that are heading to Bartlett Lake? If we're going to be narrowing some of these areas here on Cave Creek Road, has that been proposed? Because we get a lot of boaters that drive through, towing boats, and if so, would it be through residential areas? Would it be on Stagecoach? Has that been examined?
So we have not looked at that specifically. It's something that we can do as part of this process. We can look for alternatives. It's definitely something that we will need to consider as far as the traffic beyond just this core and how these impacts affect further out. But what the primary purpose of this is looking for safety within town center, and specifically with the encouraging of pedestrian activities. We want to make sure that we're creating that safe environment for visitors and for residents.
Understood.
Yeah, we certainly can't do it in a vacuum. 'Cause,
Correct.
you squeeze here, and it's gonna pop out somewhere else, and it may be even worse. Like,
And Lena, could you speak to that?
So currently, the way that Tom Darlington and Cave Creek Road are, especially on Tom Darlington, is you have 2 lanes that merges down to 1 lane that opens back up to 1, and I'm sure. And so that doesn't actually create capacity because you have the merge action happening, which actually causes more delay. So to actually take it down to 1 lane isn't going to be creating more traffic. And so we did look at the numbers of the average annual traffic that comes through these roads, and it is warranted per federal standards for what a 1 lane would be, and would still have a great level of service if we were to stick with the one lane. But to the comment about bypass traffic, we did look at all this especially with any of the turning movements with large vehicles, just to make sure that any of the turns and the lanes would be wide enough to accommodate anybody with trucks or trailers or anything like that, because we do understand the nature of the vehicles that come through the town.
we'll have a chance the public will have a chance to speak later in the program. Thank you. Okay, council, at the moment, what we're...
No, I think the purpose of going in from 2 to 1 is to slow the traffic down for pedestrians. I mean, that's the point of doing it.
No, we have to keep some kind of order, but you have a chance to speak.
I just want, the purpose of going from 2 lanes to 1 in that area is to slow the traffic down where the pedestrians are potentially crossing. That's the idea.
Yes, actually, when we look at like safe system roads, we always want to look at kind of creating more friction to reduce traffic. And so especially with the two lanes merging into one, you get some of that aggressive behavior, people trying to bypass and you know, cut in front of people. So actually getting people to reduce down to one lane ahead of the town core and getting them to a slower speed is what we were trying to aim for. Exactly.
Okay, Rebecca.
Thank you.
No, please, you're gonna have a chance. We just have to okay, well,
Mayor,
please don't ask any questions.
Mayor, I just wanted to clarify, and it
Have a
was,
chance, ma'am.
it does go to what William was saying, is that when we look at the one lane scenario, is that we already have one lane for about, what, 50 to 60% of town center as it is. So how that changes things if you take the other percentage down to one lane, that's what they're trying to say is that really it doesn't impact the traffic whatsoever in that perspective. When it comes to the one thing that we evaluated when we looked at cut-through traffic and how would people look to take the route through Bloody Basin, that was one of the things that we've also been looking at when we look at, you know, how do things get squeezed out the other side. And then the other side of it is when we look at the one lane, starting that before you actually enter into the town center area, because that would allow us to slow the traffic down for where there would potentially be pedestrian crossings such as at Bloody Basin and Tranquil Trail. And that was something that was brought up. And one of the things I did want to, and I didn't say it in the earlier part of my presentation, was we did have about 18 months of input to this point from neighborhoods and communities and everything else. And so that does set the framework for this, but this particular discussion is kind of like we'll say it's like at about the 75% point to present all of the things that have culminated to this point, but we're not done yet. And so people will still have a lot of opportunity to input on this particular plan. So, thank you, Mayor.
So Steve, in terms of the project overall, how do you contemplate funding it, all the changes, the roadway changes?
So let's go let them, do you want to answer that now, or do you guys want to? Yeah, so I can answer that now, Councilmember Johnson, Mayor. The way we look at again, this is one of those things when we look at the comprehensive nature of what we would like to see as far as what makes the best sense for Carefree. And then it comes down to how do you phase that, how do you fund it? And there's a lot of ways you can fund projects like this. And one is you can look at your capital improvement planning as part of that. We have these vacant lots that are along Cave Creek Road. As those develop, we would require that these improvements get put in place. One of the things that we're looking at doing is revitalizing or redeveloping the town center site and maybe finding a better alternative to that. That will allow us to address maybe the Sunshine Way, how that gets all developed, because we own the right-of-way, which makes it really nice. That's part of our real estate portfolio. So we have Sunshine Way, we have the right-of-way, and how we can best utilize that, all becomes part of that particular project. And then we can say as part of some type of RFP that we go out with, that there would be an expectation that those improvements get built. I think there's a lot of mechanisms we can look to the private sector to do it. I think there's ways that we can have the public sector fund it for the things that make sense, and we put it in a phasing program as part of capital planning that really makes sense over the next 5 to 10 years or 20 years as we look at how we built this type of infrastructure.
So is this part of your private partnership concept that you're talking about, partnering with businesses and people?
So that's a little bit different. The private partnership concept would be, how do we work with the private businesses on private facilities? So are there buildings that we would like to see revitalized? Or some of them just need to have paint jobs. Some of them just need to be able to, when we look at the various structures inside a town center, how do we get those to what we would call a Carefree standard? And so that's going to be what we'll look at as a private-public partnership. And if you look at a lot of communities that when they have a redevelopment, revitalization area, they have these types of projects programs, because a lot of these buildings were built in different eras, they were built in different times, and they have different architectures, and they have unique circumstances and unique problems. And so how do we work together to collaboratively get them to invest along, how do we seed investment, but they have to have a stake in the game, and it has to be something that is beneficial to the community, has a public benefit.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see the southern part.
Okay, one last piece on this before we move on is that blow up area there on the left of your screen, just to highlight what that is. That is a recommended improvement to those two current traffic circle configurations that are there on Wampum Way and Carefree Drive. Those are not functioning well, as we've discussed, and they create a lot of confusion for drivers. So what this is showing is an option for improving the circulation through that location using striping solely. So taking a look at what we can do to improve the flow in the simplest way possible is what that blow up image there shows on the left. It's creating a forced movement that makes that traffic circle act more like a roundabout versus the traffic circle that it is.
Okay.
All right, so then moving to the south. The south has fewer bigger changes. So I think, you know, from the overall perspective, you see the 2 additional number 8s. Those again are those intersections that we know can be problematic, and that those are also your gateway entries into the town. When we're looking at these improvements, we're really looking at these 3 intersections. So these 2 and then the Tom Darlington and Cave Creek intersection to the north as the limits of our study area. That's where we've looked specifically at the road narrowing, and we've looked at creating these circulation improvements. So again, those 2 intersections have the potential to be enhanced, and what that enhancement looks like is something that would of course require further analysis, but we know that these are opportunities to improve traffic flow in those 2 intersections, and also to take advantage of the fact that these are your entry points into the town center, and they could create a nice gateway feature as well. Along Bloody Basin, we have included what are called sharrows. What that means is it's a shared bike and vehicular route. In previous iterations of this plan, there was a consideration for a separated pathway on this side, on the south side of Bloody Basin. Instead of that, we have had bicycles and vehicles share the road given the low speed of traffic on that stretch. So that is a modification to what you've seen previously. Another item that I'll point out is the vehicular entrances again into town center. Those are the number 2s that you'll see on the screen. So we have one there at Carefree Drive. We have another at Elbow Bend. And the traffic circle that currently is at Carefree Drive and Easy Street is one that would remain, though we would do improvements to that one from the effectiveness of travel through there, but we think it does create a nice gateway as you're entering from that location. Otherwise, again, the dark, the black are the new sidewalk locations, and then we have, again, some designated pedestrian corridors in the tan color. That's the number 5 to increase connectivity throughout the community. Comments on these areas?
Comments? Questions?
Okay. So then moving on to the next steps and some of the major design considerations. So we're looking at lane widths, of course. We've talked about driveways. We're looking at sidewalk improvements, how we tie in to the areas beyond our project limits and how those merges happen. Those are things that we need to think about moving forward. We want to look at parking stall dimensions as we look at potential parking along the streets. We want to make sure that we are doing the parking in the most effective way and the safest way possible. Looking at curb and gutter, understanding the drainage impacts that some of these improvements may have. Looking at potential right-of-way limitations. And of course, some of the logistics, utilities, environmental impacts. We'll need a full traffic analysis and potentially a roundabout analysis as well. And that is it for this portion of the presentation. I can go back to the overall main view of the plan and take any additional questions.
So I have a couple questions. So maybe I haven't been following it closely enough, but
Sure.
has there been public input, and how did that work?
Sure, I'll ask Steve to speak to that. I know he's been working with the public a bit.
Mayor, Council, yeah, there's been a public input on this particular process. And it kind of went hand in hand a lot with the signage. So we did have a stakeholder group, and we did the original stakeholder group had been expanded as things changed, and so as we asked Don to participate in that as needed, and as new businesses came in or as new residents came in that showed interest. Peggy McKiernan, who's not here, we added her. We actually had a bus driver that lived in Alta Vista for the Cave Creek District who drives these streets every day with a big vehicle. We thought that would be great, provide a great perspective and how to maneuver and what she saw, and she gave great perspective on all of these things. And so, and then we did go around and we met with each of the individual HOA neighborhoods to get their input on, on safety. I think is the number one issue that a lot of people did bring up. And I think the other thing is how do I walk down the street and get to Bricks Wine? I mean, people want to be able to do that, and not walk into the gutters into this and on the side of the road. And so those are the things that we did receive as far as input goes. But we understand this is a big process. This is a big project. It requires input from property owners. It requires input from the businesses, and it requires the input from the residents as well. And so, we've gone around, we've talked to the businesses. We did have a public workshop. One of the key public workshops we had was we actually set up stations that talked about the revitalization and redevelopment, that talked about the signage, and then it went specifically into the circulation. And we had a pretty decent turnout to that and received a lot of good input on that as well. And so, all these things do fit together. And so I think it's good that we're taking our time to walk through the conversation. And again, looking at the limited resources we're going to be dealing with and figuring out what's the best strategy to move forward. That's going to have the best bang for our buck. And I think it's going to be a little bit of kind of everything to start and as we move forward. So that's the input process. And then what we're looking to do is kind of repeat what we did last year. Start with the summertime, hit the people who live here year round, in and around this area here. And we enter the fall, we'll start ramping it up and doing more of the general open houses to be able to get greater input. And then as people start to come back into town, we can have additional open houses for people who maybe don't spend their full-time year-round here as well. And so that's kind of what we're looking at, and trying to bring something to the P&Z. That's why we invited the P&Z here as well, is that when we looking to get some of the P&Z probably by the end of fall, maybe December timeframe, and then looking maybe December, January, even February, depending on how the process goes, to get something approved by council. And again, approval is the approval of a conceptual plan. It won't be you do this and then you're spending something that's going to cost probably in total about, I don't know, a lot of money. No comment on that one. But yeah, then again, but as we approve what we want, then we start putting together how we put these funding mechanisms, how they go into the CIP. It goes through budget processes, and that's kind of how this whole public process is going to work.
If signs cost $1 million, this costs $100 million.
So I think I think the last time we were talking, we're still in single digit, or in 6 digits. We're not in 7, right?
Well, so my suggestion is during the process, an eye should be kept to things which are attainable.
Yep.
And get the most, have the most impact.
Absolutely. And I think the things that we start with are the things that are easy. There's a lot of sidewalk connections that need to be made that are, there's things that people already talked about. There's parts in the garden we probably just need to fix. There's low-hanging fruit there that really isn't going to cost, that's going to have a big bang. How do we connect our current intersections to existing sidewalks instead of, you walk across the street from a ditch into a ditch. And so those are the things we just need to start, I think, primarily focusing on when we look at the pedestrian ways. And then, and then as we look at the circulation, I think there's lots of things we can do that are done with striping, that can be done in ways where we're not spending a significant amount of money to make improvements. And it also gives us a chance to potentially even look at, is this working? How's it working? Is it not working properly? We've already seen that when we change the paint, some people think it's great. Some people can't stand the fact that, now they have to make this little jog. And so I think there's a lot of things that we'll need to consider as we move through it. But at the end of the day, we want to look and say, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, what's the right way that this town should function and look? How should people be connected? And that's what we're really trying to accomplish with this at this point, and trying to solicit that input. And then we can start getting into those phasing conversations and prioritization of what needs to be done.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, thank you. Okay, So I'm going to open up some public comment, so you can come on up to the podium, speak for no more than 3 minutes, please. Mr. John Trainer.
Same person, same greeting. Good evening again. Having lived here for 23 years, I've got to see the town change over time. Some of it's good, some of it not so good. I heard a lot of "we" during this last segment, and no disrespect to you, young lady, that is your job, to present options. I heard a lot of "we," and perhaps you all have been exposed to most of this previously, but a lot of this is new to me. And we talked earlier about stakeholders, opening it up to more people. I think before we move ahead, in my mind, I think before we move ahead with putting this grand plan together, we should really hear what people, residents, feel about the vision, their vision, the people that live here. We agreed a little earlier to put something on hold, put the brakes on it a little bit. Let's hear from people, a wider audience of people, how they feel about changing the character of our downtown area. Now, I thought these traffic circles were crazy when I saw them, when I first moved here. It was just being finished, and I thought it was insane. They're not traffic circles. They're not roundabouts. Down at Hayden and Northside, those are traffic circles. These are not, and you can go around them pretty fast if you want to. I think we need to take a good look, hard look at this, because once we start making these changes, and again, all due respect to Steve, some of it can be done in segments, but once you do it, some of these changes, you then have to undo it if it doesn't work. And some of them are not small. So I would rather see, personally, let's slow down a bit here again. Let's hear from a wider audience. I don't have to be right. If the town people, a majority of them, feel that we should be doing this for the future, hey, I'm well into my 70s. May not be around here in 10 or 15 years. Gary's probably happy about that. But if I am here, I'd like to be happy with what I contributed to as a resident. And I think you guys probably feel the same way, and girls feel the same way. Let's slow down, take a look, let more people get an idea of what this is and what it can be. And then it does fit together with signs. Once you have figured this out, what people want, what the vision is, once you've figured it out, then you can figure out how to do the signs. I think you got to put that in the right order. Just, again, my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Colleen Roser Skirty. Thank you.
I'll just call me Colleen. I'll just go with that. Colleen Rose Skirty, Carefree resident. I would agree, in a sense, I would put a pause on this. I think it does tie in with the general plan and with the other signs and everything else. I will say, I was with Steve at some of those community meetings, and I did give my input. My input is not reflected up there. And I know that other people were in agreement with me, as I discussed with other people here, but they never seemed to kind of make it on that board. My thought is we are a small rural town, and that's really what the residents want to keep. And I feel like this is downtown Scottsdale. This is a big city plan. And downtown Cave Creek, they don't have sidewalks, right? And I think that this would drastically change our culture. It would change our community into something that we are not, and I think that what people don't want to see. Simpler, I think, is better. You talk about safety, and I'm all for safety. I just think there's simpler, less expensive ways that we can get there. I am not a fan of what happened on Tom Darlington there. I think it's more of a hazard. I think it needs to go away with what is currently there. I think there are a lot of people that use these streets, and putting them into a one-way and making them slow down, I think is going to be problematic. I know that you've done a lot of work, and I can appreciate that, and I see that people want to do all that. I think it's a lot of money that was probably spent that could have been spent in a better way. I think when we come out with our general plan, and then we look at, spend the money on getting the businesses here, and then let's see what little signs we need and what adjustments we need to make. I've seen similar systems like this set up. They weren't what the residents wanted, They hate them, but they're stuck with them. They had no choice. We have a choice. And so I would just say put a pause, get some more involvement, get the people out here to say what they want in a more, to keep our town the way it is and more fiscally responsible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Michael Braun.
Hi, Michael Braun. I agree with both of a lot of different things that were said tonight. But the one thing I would like to do is I would like to very much compliment the town council. I believe you listened tonight. I believe that you have heard the community and what they want or don't want, and we're all going to have different ideas. But thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Stuart Skirty.
I also want to thank you all very much for listening and hearing what we're having to say. I want everybody to realize in the magnified screen there, those lines in the middle of the street to the left of the parking, those are cars in the middle of the street. They get hit from behind when people take their eye off the road for just a second. Where we used to live, this is horrific. It looks horrible. Those green bike paths, they're neon green, and they're about 4 feet wide. This is downtown Scottsdale. It will change the character of our town forever. We won't be a small rural town. We won't be a desert town. We'll be downtown Scottsdale. If people understand that, if they actually see a picture of what it looks like, they will hate it. So please, consider more input from more people, the people that live here, and give us an opportunity to get more input.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that'll close the public input. Any comment from council? So I think the message is pretty clear, and I would agree with it. Because as we go forward, make sure we publicize what we're doing, get people to come, and take what they have to say into account.
I do have one comment. Taking everything into consideration, Greg Crossman's presentation, just everything we're hearing, one thing we should be mindful of is there's a lot of things competing for limited capital resources. So we should husband our cash the best we can. And I realize that there will be people that won't be happy, and there'll be some people that'll be happy. And that's where the compromise and give and takes are gonna have to take place.
I did have something I wanted to add. I think, and thank you again for the study and for the illustrations. And I think it's very important that if we are going to examine anything, it's on resident safety. And if that means regarding, the bike paths, the sidewalks, and we are a community of, our median age here is 69.4. And so we need to be concerned for our residents and for those pedestrians that live across the street from our town center. So if there is anything we can examine, it is in safety first. So.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank
Thank
you
you
for
all
the
for your
nice
feedback.
presentation.
Thank you.
And all your hard work, both of you. All right, item number 13. Review, discussion, and possible action to approve Resolution 2023-03 extending the contract for services with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. So we have three gentlemen here who have waiting. Captain Brantamonte, Chief Doherty, and Chief Rosca. So thank you very much for your patience. It's an honor to have you here, so we really appreciate it. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Neese, and we'll kick off this item.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I have a 3-hour presentation, so I'll try and keep my comments brief here. Obviously, the existing contract with with MCSO is set to expire later this month. The contract renewal was presented to town staff in May. The contract is for 3 years with an automatic renewal for another 3 years. So if we renew it, it runs from July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2029 with the automatic renewal. The refinements of the new contract included clarifications and definitions, updating general terms and conditions in accordance with county legal and risk management department requirements, and updating the cost explanation to more closely align with the worksheet, which is the cost recovery model in Exhibit A, and that's what they charge all the contract communities that contract for services with MCSO, and I believe there's 7 or 8 communities similar to Carefree and Cave Creek. The contract for law enforcement services are based on quantitative and qualitative data such as the population of a community, types of crime, numbers of calls for service for response times, and proximity to the MCSO substation, which we're lucky to have in the town of Cave Creek. The service level is measured in a term called a beat. Each beat contains 5 full-time enforcement officers plus proportional full-time employment associated with supporting detectives, sergeants, lieutenants, and a captain. And Captain Brandamont is here tonight. He's the captain of our district. Based upon Carefree's quantitative and qualitative analysis by MCSO, Carefree's service level has historically been a third of a beat. Carefree also benefits from the location of the district substation, as I suggested earlier, in the town of Cave Creek, and access and visibility to patrols of nearby areas. So we have the county islands to the south of us. We also have the lake patrol to the east of us, and they all come through the town of Carefree, so we benefit from the visibility of these respective patrols. In addition to the base service levels that I articulated earlier, the communities that contract with MCSO can contract for additional law enforcement services. In our case, it's an additional traffic patrol during the peak season, and that's October through April. So we have a traffic car dedicated to Carefree to patrol our streets, to calm our streets during those peak travel seasons. Every year in late February, the town receives an update on the next fiscal year costs. We discuss that in context with the budget. As determined by Maricopa County, these costs include personnel services, supplies and rent, communications, equipment, vehicles, and other associated equipment, and one-time costs and indirect costs recovery of approximately 3%. As presented in the upcoming fiscal year, the overall cost of this contract will increase by approximately 17% or $85,000. It's interesting to note that 87% of the contract costs, the contract will be for $583,000 this year. $444,000 and change is associated with personnel costs. So similar to rural metro, this is a labor-centric contract. So we're paying mainly for that personnel. 13% is for the other indirect costs and the equipment costs. The action before you tonight is Resolution 2023-03 to authorize execution and extension of the contract for services with Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. And once again, we have the operation chief here with us tonight and his supporting staff. So call upon them to further introduce themselves. And I know there was a question earlier about DUIs, and he could further address that question as well.
Okay, thank you. So Captain Brandamont, maybe you can come on up with your men. And
Good evening, Mayor, Council, town staff, and community members. I'm Captain Brandon Marta. I'm the District Commander for Carefree. So, let's talk about enforcement a little bit. The last couple of years, our numbers have gone down, so we've seen crime decrease, we've seen traffic enforcement go up. So far this year, we've had the one issue over here by the airport, the accident involving a DUI. I did hear the comment about, the DUI van being out here. Prior to my arrival, I don't think that van was ever out here before. We never had DUI task force in town during the neighbors' special events. And that was something I brought to the table. That is additional manpower that's not charged back to the community at all. We bring in DUI task force that's funded by Governor's Office of Highway Safety. So while there's always room for improvement, we recognize there are times when the base services that are described in this contract, we bring in additional resources. And so the contract, it doesn't go up, it doesn't adjust, it doesn't shrink or it doesn't expand based on what we need to get the job done here in town. So I think that's an important component for everybody to understand.
So what goes on in that truck?
Well, there's a, there's actually, well, there's a bathroom. There's a holding facility. There's a small little jail, holds, I think, 2 people. And then there's 2 or 3 DUI processing centers. So there's breathalyzers, there's a workplace for the phlebotomist to work. It's very similar to what we have in the substation in Cave Creek. And when we have a large event like that, the thought process was we put the van down here and we put, you know, the other half, we'd work out of our substation. Because it's very busy, as everybody knows, traffic's kind of tricky. And so depending on where we locate somebody, if we have to take them in for processing, we just take them to whichever area is closest. Because there's time constraints when we start the DUI testing process.
So we're very thankful to have it. Even when it's just sitting there, I think it sends a good message. So
Correct. It's a big billboard is part
Exactly.
of it. We want people to see it.
So
it's a-
during the, say, bike week,
Yes.
we'll call it, I don't know, 2 weekends and 5 days in between. So how much use does it get? How many offenders are typically
Well, it
processed?
depends. So we look at everything statistically, and we look at what's going on in town, and then we also, you know, as we're coming up with an operations plan, the bulk of our operation is addressing the crowds and the traffic issue. And so this conversation that I'm having with you tonight, same conversation I have with the mayor of Cave Creek and what the expectations are and what resources we're bringing to bear. And so, when we do our operational planning, we try to keep, and I don't want to, this is going to sound bad, we try to keep the problem over there, but as we know, Tom Darlington is a way to get to Cave Creek, up to Pima is another way. And so when we do DUI enforcement, we focus on the entries and egresses from town, as opposed to the actual town itself. And then there's a different component that provides traffic flow services. And so, you know, one of the comments when I first got here that I heard was that, you know, the deputies are working for the bars. Well, that's partly true. And so to give it some context, the bars do pay the deputies that work in the street to do traffic control. We have no affiliation with the bars. We're just trying to offset the cost, because what happens is the average bike week's anywhere from $80,000 to $105,000 in resources that I bring in every year. And so that's not passed on to either one of the communities. It's either Governor's Office of Highway Safety, or we have the bar subsidize and offset the cost and kind of run it off duty, if you will. But we still have control and command of the event.
Any other questions from council?
So do you have DUI checkpoints then? Is that what you
No. So they're basically traffic cars, and so they'll develop PC for a traffic stop, and then wherever the investigation takes them, whether, you know, you can smell most of the time people drinking or. DUI checkpoints, that's a tricky topic for us. So is the best way I will describe that.
Captain, is Bartlett Lake part of our contract?
So it is not part of the contract, but that's a National Forest Service contract, and there's deputies that work up there during the week and on the weekends, and so you'll see a lot of pass-through traffic. There's only one way to get up there, and it's through Carefree. So there's the added benefit of the visual, and those guys actually make stops and bring them over to the station, and so. But statistically, whatever work they do is captured under their work cost center. It's not assigned to us, if that makes sense. So when we're looking at numbers, you know, I don't necessarily get the benefit of the work that they're doing as they're passing through.
I know, just shifting gears a little bit. So one of the things I hear the most about is speeding and then rolling through or blowing through stop signs. So we had some discussions related to that tonight. So what do you suggest? We have some four-way stops, right, at Pima and Cave Creek Road. We have a four-way stop here at Tom Darlington and Cave Creek Road. Are there any simple solutions for even a marginal improvement?
You know, that's a loaded question, and this is the second time I was asked this question, because I was asked the same question by Anthem. Anthem for my patrol district eats the bulk of my resources. And it's unfortunate. And so when we're trying to shift and balance people to be able to respond to calls, we try to keep it evenly spaced, but there are times, you know, the Anthem guys come over here to do work, and there are times our guys go over there to do work, depending on. But as far as the traffic, it's simply traffic enforcement. So there's the 3 E's, right? There's engineering, there's education, and then there's enforcement. Enforcement is the one everybody hates. Like, everybody wants it until they're the one that's having a conversation with one of the deputies. And so we would really like to focus on the education part of it and maybe the engineering. I heard some great conversations about what to do. I will tell you that that part of Tom Darlington going through the downtown corridor is a bit confusing. And I do think, you know, and I'm not making a recommendation one way or the other, I would just offer my 2 cents that probably needs to be looked at, because the merging back and forth, I think I'm more concerned a driver being confused and hitting a pedestrian. I think we've had a couple of close calls.
Okay, okay.
So,
Pardon me, are you saying that in the areas where we narrow the traffic down over here, that it causes confusion?
I do think it causes, because you have turn lanes, and you have to shift right, then you have to shift left, and then you have to shift right again because there's a turn lane, and then and I, as a professional, I've done 35 years, it causes me, I get confused.
Yeah,
Especially when you're drinking and
You
driving.
should, yeah, well, not yet, soon.
No, but that's important. Your
Yeah,
perspective.
no, exactly. You know, I think it does, you know, and that's just my humble opinion for whatever it's worth.
okay. On the traffic trailer, so I've asked for that, and I've gotten it, so you guys have been great.
Yes.
Posting
Well,
around.
you know, the town manager and I, we have a great rapport. I'm very sensitive to the needs of the community, but I'm trying, again, it's trying to balance resource. We're data-driven. So I hear all the time we have an issue on this particular street, so we'll put the trailer out, we'll collect data. Because no one's afraid of the trailer, but if you put a car out there, everybody behaves. And so we want the data to see that the traffic trailer allows us to target times. So instead of putting a deputy at an intersection for an 8-hour shift, I can put them out there between 4:30 and 5 o'clock, you know, and get the most bang for our buck. So that's really when you see the trailer, we're doing data collection to try to figure out what's the best way to attack the problem.
So data collection means how fast they're going, how many cars are going by.
Exactly. How many cars per hour, how fast, what's the average speed, you know, and we can kind of come up with a traffic enforcement plan. And so the benefit through your contract is you do have a dedicated, so I have 1 traffic car in the district. You guys have access to them for 6 months out of the year, and then the other 6 months I have to spread them around. And so it's nice when I have extra bodies, but right now I think law enforcement in general is kind of suffering staffing-wise, like a lot of professions overall. So we're managing as best we can with what we have, and I think we're still doing a pretty good job for you guys.
So on October 1st through March 31st, we have an additional, I don't know, fraction of a beat somehow.
Yeah, 40 hours per week, traffic enforcement.
So, exactly. So what's a reasonable expectation for having an officer on the street or at a 4-way stop, looking for?
We can tailor that traffic enforcement plan to whatever you think is the most important thing, but I will tell you, if we put them at a 4-way stop, everybody stops.
Oh, yeah, so maybe that's
So,
not the
so I
answer.
mean, I like,
Yeah, so that's what I'm really asking. What I'm really asking is, how many hours, what's a reasonable expectation for us to see a car in our town sitting somewhere?
you will get your traffic car 40 hours a week. And what we do is we try to vary it. So the traffic car has a little autonomy to make his own schedule. So we look at, when we get our reports and we look at other data, where we're gonna be most effective. So he may come in Tuesday morning at 4 o'clock in the morning and work an 8-hour shift, and then he may come in Thursday night at 6 p.m. Traditionally, Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights are busy, and so we try to focus on that, but we have to balance that with other requests, so.
So the average is 5 to 6 hours a day?
Yeah, five to
during
6
that
hours a day
high
is
season.
pretty reasonable, yes. And then you have the regularly assigned beat deputy that also makes traffic stops here.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, I have one. So who's responsible for Scott
I believe that's City of Scottsdale, the roadway itself. Yeah. That's why they put their, I don't know if you've noticed, they put their traffic camera out there. Okay. I mean, we obviously pass through there and we take action whenever we see a violation, but that's their primary responsibility, yes.
Yeah, they just don't do a lot of enforcement though, just I know, not your house, right?
I'm empathetic to your comment.
Okay, then you know we deal with trying to get out.
Yes, sir.
Good question.
No, just a comment, just curious. Steve, the traffic data, is that helpful to you in any way? Your studies? With the speed and volume that the captain's referencing?
Yeah, and I think it's very helpful for us, and if we look at what the issues Stacy was talking about, we're trying to fix those problems, that we're trying to get rid of the disjoint.
Yeah, no, I get it.
all down
I just
and-
want to see if you had, he has access to that data if he needed it. Was
We can certainly have a conversation and get them access to that for sure.
Yeah, just curious. Thank you.
More information we can get, the better, I'm sure.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, any other questions? Well, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
That was really good. All right, so now it's up to us to consider resolution 2023-03. So this is a resolution of the mayor and town council of the town of Carefree, Arizona, to authorize and approve an extension of an agreement for law enforcement services between the town of Carefree and the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. So I would entertain a motion for
I'll entertain that
approval.
motion to initiate it.
Second.
Okay, any other comments, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you. Item number 14. Adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. Second. Right. Thank you for sticking it out for 3 hours. You couldn't.